You haven't even read that?
Wait, what are you doing with the book?
So he has the confidence to finish the story.
Hear now the words of the witches.
This is Kevin, and welcome to Words of the Witches, the Charmed podcast that will guide you through the lesser-known published material in the Charmed universe and decide how it fits into the grand narrative of the TV series. All right, welcome, spell worders. This is Words of the Witches. It is episode 102. We are here. I'm Kevin, your resident Charmed resource.
And I'm Sean, and I just love comic books.
And joining us today is established comic book writer, editor, letterer, Erica Schultz. Hello.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, thank you for joining us today. We're very excited. This is going to be cool and fun. So we have just covered on this podcast the 5-issue Dynamite run of Charmed, 1,000 Deaths, which you wrote.
Yes.
But you've also done work for Marvel, DC, and your independent works. So are there any other stand-up projects that you're particularly proud of?
I think it's like I'm proud of pretty much everything that I do. But I will say that I'm very proud that I was announced as the first woman writer on Spawn. That's going to be coming out. Rat City will be coming out in the spring, and I'm really excited about that. Um, and I'm getting more and more chance to work with Elektra at Marvel. So
Ooh.
she's pretty badass. So she's fun to work with. And yeah, I mean, I loved when we got to work on Charmed because I was a huge fan of the show, and I loved the characters. I loved the sisterhood of it, but also there was a realness to the interaction of the characters on the show. You know, the sort of frustrating but also caring so much for each other, and that was really, I think, well done.
Yeah, and you're one of three in your family, three
Yes, I am.
siblings.
I am the youngest of three. So I'm the Phoebe, but not really the Phoebe, but then the Paige, but yeah.
The rigmarole, the
Yeah,
moving around.
exactly.
I feel like so many of us say that. Like, we identify with Phoebe, we're not like Phoebe in a way, so it's a very common
Well,
thing.
it's funny because I did a book for Image called The Deadliest Bouquet, and it's about three sisters, nothing to do with magic. And people would come up to me and be like, "Are you a rose? Are you a violet? Or are you a poppy?" And I'm like, I'm a little bit of all three, but like at different times of my life. Like my early 20s, I would say was definitely violet. But then like I'm now more in like my rose phase, the oldest sister phase, now that I'm in my 40s. But and I had like a little bit of poppy in the middle, so I don't know.
Yeah, that Deadliest Bouquet,
Yes.
that's a story about three sisters who have to come together after they lost their mom.
Yes, Three
Uh,
Estranged Sisters in 1998, which is when Charmed, the TV show,
yeah.
launched, come together to solve their mother's murder and try not to kill each other in the process.
So what do you think is the biggest difference and the biggest similarity between that and Charmed?
I would say that the biggest similarity, obviously, is this dynamic between these three sisters who will fight to the death for each other, but also fight each other to the death. Um, and then, and obviously, the difference is the magic part, the magic aspect of it. But I really do like the relationship between these sisters, and you see in Charmed, and you also saw in Deadliest Bouquet, this idea of how when you're one of three, you always have two that gang up on one. And it's always, and that alliance switches sides all the time. And you saw that in Charmed when, it would be Piper and Prue ganging up on Phoebe, or, you know, even strangely enough, when it would be Phoebe and Prue ganging up on Piper, because Piper would sometimes be like a bit of a procrastinator on things
Yeah.
sometimes, you know. So I think that, and then, when Paige came along, it was the idea of like, well, Paige is still our sister, but she's still kind of an outsider. So it was like the Piper, Phoebe versus Paige, and, that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about you. Like outside of your work, outside of this, what are your other like favorite pastimes and hobbies and things?
Oh man, this is like the weirdest thing to do, but like I like weaving. So like I weave like, friendship bracelets and like bookmarks
Oh,
and stuff like that. and I like just because it helps keep my hands busy, you know. Um, and I'm learning Psy. So my best friend's husband is a martial artist, and because I've been working with Electra so much, I made a joke that I wanted to learn Psy, and he literally
Oh my
bought
gosh.
me like I'm not even kidding. Like this is insane. This is so insane.
This is so cool.
And they're and
I
now
love
Wow.
wait a
that.
minute. Wait a minute. These are not like these are the real deal. These are not
Yeah.
like, you know,
Yeah.
plastic.
No cheap toys. Yeah.
These are the real, and they are pointy. Um, so my husband said he's like, play with the pointy things outside in the backyard. Um, so once a week, my best friend's husband comes over and shoves me around the backyard a bit. No, 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 you got to stand in this stance, and you got to do this, and you got to do that. And I'm like, you've done this literally for 30 years. I've done this for like 3 hours total over 2 weeks. So, but yeah, I mean, he is now thrilled that he has a new student, and he has very high hopes for me. I told him a little too high,
Oh my
but
gosh.
yeah, he's like 6 months. We're gonna put you in a competition. I'm like,
You're funny.
yeah, you're very funny. And I said to him, I was like, that is a very high bar. I was like, not to say that I can't reach it, but maybe next year, like maybe at the end of next year, you think about putting me into a competition. Like we've just been hanging out in the backyard for, an hour a week. So yeah. But yeah, I mean, I like watching TV. My husband and I are probably the two worst people to watch anything narrative though, because he's a film and television editor
Oh,
and studied film and directing, and I'm a writer. So we'll sit there and we'll just sort of like break it down and like they should have done this, or he'll be like, oh man, they thought it, they tried to pretend that it was like one long cut, but I could see the cut point there and this. So we're like the worst people to see a movie with. Um, but yeah, I mean, we're very normal. We're like boringly normal, which is, I
yeah.
think
That's not
kind of
bad.
okay, kind of okay
Yeah.
at this point.
Refreshing. Yeah.
Says the lady who fights out back with size. We're
That's so
so
normal.
normal.
My neighbors, like one of them was like peeking over the fence, like, what the hell is going on over there?
Do we have
I mean,
ninjas in our neighborhood?
and Rich is like, okay, no, no, put your feet like this and do this and do this, and I'm like, I think our neighbors are gonna call the cops on us. Like hearing these clangs and like weird
Yeah.
things going on. Yeah. We are normal though. Aside from that, we're normal.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what got you into the comics? Or were you a big fan of them before you started working on them, or?
Oh, just comics in general.
Yeah.
Yeah, I loved reading comics when I was a kid. My older brother would always bring home comics, and I would read. It was a lot of X-Men, Uncanny X-Men, like Claremont and Byrne, Claremont and Lee, Jim Aparo on Batman, Todd McFarlane on Spider-Man. And when I got to college, I started college in '95, and one of my very close friends from college was still super into comics at the time, and so he got me into like Spawn, and I had not been paying attention to X-Men, so I didn't know anything about Age of Apocalypse. And then he's like, "Oh my God, you have to like read this like new thing that's coming out." And he really got me back into comics. And then I sort of waded in and out of it because I was working in New York, and I had like you get your first apartment, life is happening, and you're freelancing at a bar for extra money kind of thing. And then I remember sitting down, and a friend of ours was staying with us, and it was a Saturday morning, and I turned on the TV, and it was X-Men Evolution. And I was like, holy Christmas. And between X-Men Evolution and the Justice League, that just totally reignited my love for comics.
Spark.
And I was just like, amazing. And I didn't start actually working in comics until 2008, because I was working at a studio. I was working at Continuity Studios, and we worked on the Astonishing X-Men motion comic.
Mm-hmm.
And I was brought in to do, background art and things like that. And I was there for about a year when I thought, maybe some of these stories that I'd written, and just thrown in a notebook, um, maybe I could try to work them out in terms of a comic. And that first comic was M3. I worked on it with one of the other artists at the studio, and it just really it made me love the medium even more because I like seeing the behind the scenes. I like
Right.
seeing how things are made. And working at the studio for almost 8 years, I mean, I had a front row seat to all of it. And it was an education, and it was just very, very interesting to see, you know, prior to this, you would come to a shop and you would just see the final product on the shelf, and you knew that people worked hard on it, but you didn't know how many moving parts there really was in terms of, penciling, inking, lettering, um, coloring, the editorial, final, layout, I mean, it was just, I mean, there's so much to go that goes into it, that I was really very interested in just seeing like how everything came together. So,
Yeah, Sean's a big comic book nut, and we actually have X-Men podcast together too.
oh,
We're covering
awesome.
we're covering all of the animated shows up in, so we're finishing the original series now and then getting into 97 and Evolution coming up. So
Ooh,
um
Evolution. Well, Evolution is where X-23 first came out. That
yeah,
was
and
her
you wrote
first
X-23
introduction.
Renegade, so there you go. Yeah.
So there you go. Yeah.
Fun, fun.
It all comes together.
I know.
Do you have a favorite X person?
I do. I love Rogue. I've loved Rogue from the beginning. When I before I started writing comics, I was like writing like basically like fanfic, and I wrote this like Avengers story and it was when Rogue was on the Avengers because it was during Uncanny, and the whole Unity Squad and everything. And I remember that Rogue's first appearance was August 1981, and it was King Size Avengers number 10. And in that, she's stealing everybody's powers. And she has this whole thing with Captain America where she knocks him out and she says, well, I could just touch him to take his powers, but this is more fun. And she kisses him while he's unconscious. And I was like, that is just so saucy. So I had this like opening sequence as a joke that I was like just writing to like test out how to write comics and stuff, where you sort of just see Captain America and he's got, you see these broad shoulders and these arms across the newspaper, and he's got the newspaper and he's on one side of the panel, and then Rogue comes in, and in front of him is of course a Captain America mug with of course the shield on it because branding. And she comes in and she just sits down next to him, just kind of like puts her head on the counter because she's exhausted, and he just gently slides the coffee next to her, and she just starts drinking it. And he starts asking her questions about like if that dirty Cajun was here, because Gambit's that evil man who's so handsome. um and and after they have this sort of back and forth, she makes some comment about Steve getting out more, and he reminds her, I remember you kissed me once and it wasn't a pleasant experience. And I always wanted to bring that back because nobody talks about that. Her first appearance in comics ever, she gets the better of Cap and just
Mm.
lays one right on him. No one ever talks about that. So,
Well, now it's out there in the ether. So thank you for bringing that up.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Cool. I know you love acting as an editor as well as a writer. What's your favorite part about the process and helping other artists' voices come through?
One of the things that I think is really important as an editor is trying to keep to the original vision. So when I'm editing something, I will sit down with the creative team and say, what is your end goal? Like what is your vision for this story? And I sort of try and act as guardrails, because as creators sometimes we can just go totally off the path and just go, oh, let's do this and that and the next thing, and then the story just gets wildly out of control. But I try and think, okay, this is where you want the story to go. I'm going to keep you in line. So you can move within this path, but I'm going to keep you on this path. And I think that that's really important. Some editors, I think, can almost feel as if the writer is facilitating their own vision. I don't want anything to do with that. I don't want to jump into your vision. I want to help make sure that the vision that you have, that you stay there and that you don't get distracted by all this other stuff. Because one of the hardest things about doing anything creative is finishing it. And if you keep getting influenced by 90,000 different things coming at you from social media to, the new streaming show or whatever, and you get sidetracked and you get derailed, you're not going to finish that project. So my job is to keep you on track so you finish the project. And if it's the best thing, it won't be the worst thing because I'll make sure it's not the worst thing. But if it's the best thing or just something that got done that's pretty good, then we go back and we make it better. But once you get that first draft done, that's really, the roughing out of that. And I like that. I
Yeah.
like exploring things with the creative team and really getting to the meat of a story.
Yeah. Yeah, you're such an advocate for the collaborative process, which is, great because all I think everybody is, if they're going for the same goal and they want to create something nice and wonderful and good, it's going to be nice and good. So,
And
You
wonderful.
want and wonderful. You want everybody to, and that's I think important, especially if you're doing something like indie and you're building your own team, is that if you are a writer and you are looking for an artist, you have to find an artist whose style is going to be correct for the subject matter and for the story. So if you're doing a story that is set in reality and is like M3, the story, the first book that I did with Vicente Alcazar, you don't want an art style that is very cartoonish because that takes away from the realism of the story. You want something that has a more grounded, reality based look to it. But if you're doing something that is talking animals and things like that, then doing a story, finding an artist that has a very cartoonish style and very sort of bubbly and chibi and things like that, that'll actually complement that story. So I think that, when you're collaborating with an artist, it's very important to find someone who not only has the right attitude and the right passion for the project that you do, but also somebody who has the right actual style for the project. And the same thing with the colorist. You want somebody who's going to enhance every new person that you bring onto the project. You want them to just elevate it more and more and more.
mm, nice. So, what licensed property or character would you love to write for that you haven't yet?
Well, I'd love to write Rogue and Captain America.
Rogue. There you go.
I haven't written them yet. Um, I would. I'd love to write a Bucky Barnes story. I've technically written Hawkgirl because I did an 8-page mini of Hawkgirl, but I'd love to go back to Hawkgirl. I'd love to write a Martian Manhunter story. Um, I would, trying to think. I mean, I've been insanely fortunate
Yeah.
for the projects that I've been asked to work on because Moon Knight was definitely a bucket list project, and I've been insanely fortunate to work with him. And Daredevil, again, another bucket list project. I worked with what I call DDM, which is Daredevil Matt, or DDE, Daredevil Elektra, and I'm working with both of them. So those are definitely bucket list
Cool.
characters that I'm excited about. I mean, if they want to do more Charmed comics, I'm happy to go back to Charmed. I mean, I loved working with those sisters. So let's and I'll bring in Maria Lowada again and
Yeah.
work on some art. Let's do it. Why
And
not?
how her one thing's about, because we can get right into the charm stuff now. One thing about her art we thought was super polished and super clean and super nice. We enjoyed what she brought to the table, so it's really great that you had a nice relationship.
Oh, she's fantastic. I actually have one of the original covers on this side of my wall, um, from issue number one because they had done a bajillion covers,
Very
all the variants, and I have one of the originals that I got from her. She has such a clean look and such a wonderful, smart, professional woman, and just so skilled and so willing to just collaborate. Some people, you get into, you work in comics and it's like, well, this is my vision or this is how I see it, and it doesn't matter whether they're the writer or the artist. Like, this is how I see it and this is how it should be done. And that's, yes, obviously, especially when you're working for an IP, there are certain notes that you have to hit, because the IP is, has this world, for lack of a better term, that they have to maintain. But I mean, within there, you have some wiggle room, and to be able to say, oh, like you want to do this or you want to do that, and really sort of collaborate on these moments of, you know, is this a moment where we let this beat breathe a little bit? Is this like a shocking moment that you want to make sure that the audience sort of gets, the holy crap moment, excuse me, of it. But there's also, I mean, when you're writing comics, they always say you write for the page turn. So you want to make sure that you're giving the artist uh, enough information that when that shocking moment comes, it's coming on the page turn, you know?
Mm, yeah. Yeah. um, there's very little that I could find about the development of Dynamite, like
Okay.
how they acquired the license, how the project got greenlit. Is there anything that you can enlighten us about on that?
Honestly, I don't know because I want to say it was like 2016, 2017 when they reached out and said, hey, we're acquiring some other licenses and we'd love to see what you could do on certain things. And I believe it was Zenoscope that had the license prior to
Right.
Dynamite because they had done seasons 9 and 10. Um,
Hmm.
and that's when Prue came back as Patience. And yeah. Um, and Pat Shand, who's a fantastic collaborator and writer, was working on that stuff for Zenoscope. And Pat was really great when Dynamite got it, and I started working on it. He put out a tweet saying like, "All the Charmed fans, like Erica's got this, don't worry." And I was like, "Oh, thank God, they're not going to hate me, from the beginning." Um, and basically, it was like, we're acquiring a bunch of IP. We think one or two of them might be good for you. Stand by. And then, you get the email saying like, "Hey, what do you know about Charmed?" It's, "Oh, it's a story, the three sisters, and I used to watch the show and this and the next thing." And it's like, okay, we're looking to do a 5 issue mini and it can be set anywhere between season 4 and season 8. We can't use Prue for licensing reasons or whatever. And I was like, all right. So I liked the idea of setting it before Piper knows that she's pregnant with Wyatt because I really felt like the
Hmm.
stories started to focus way more on Piper. And I liked setting it just when Paige is moving into the manor because she's sort of worked out the kinks of her relationships, but it's still a lot different
Kind of
now that
fresh. Yeah.
it's still fresh. And now that she's in the manor, it's because when she still had her own apartment, she had her way of escaping. Now she doesn't
Right.
have that anymore. She's like stuck in the manor. And I remember when I was watching the show, like that was this like big thing, like Piper and Phoebe being like, okay, she needs to move in because we can't just keep like driving to her place to pick her up. I liked that kind of idea, and I also wanted to explain. I mean, they had hinted at it, and they never really. I think I felt like they never really expanded on it. But Paige loved art, and she loved drawing, and that was something originally for her that was kind of an outlet. And that's why I wanted this story to show that that's something that she was still passionate about. And then to be able to bring that in as a plot point, with
Hmm.
these magical paints and these portals and things like that. I thought that that was kind of a cool thing to do to sort of bring them in and this idea of like framing and stuff like that. So,
Yeah, I was always appreciative of that because I noticed that right away. I'm like, yes, bring in Paige's art.
and it's funny. I always find like it weird, like, they never talk about Captain America being an artist, or they rarely talk about, Colossus being an artist, and they didn't really, they stopped basically talking about Paige being an artist. And I think that showing, even if it's not something that you do for a career, showing that helps enrich the character more. And I think it also helps show that there's a more nuanced side to the character because art is such a subjective thing in general. Like you have to have nuance, you have to have different experiences, you have to see the world in kind of a different way. So I thought that that was kind of cool to bring that in, and it allows her to have kind of a little sister charge kind of. to bring in who's also an art student. So
Right. So okay, so this is kind of a debate. I mean, I've seen you say before that you fudged the timeline a little bit to fit. It was like set in
yes,
season 4 with elements of season 5. Is that where you officially kind of put it? Is there anywhere more
yeah.
specific?
There's well, I think it's like between it's like in between episodes, like season 4, episode 3, and season 4, episode 4. I believe
Oh,
is
so that's
kind
okay.
of like where I and yes, I know I fudged the timeline, and there
Yeah.
are people who came up to me and argued with me at a convention about it, and I said, okay. I was like, look, you're okay. Your suspension of disbelief will allow for sisters and magic and demons and all of this stuff. But your suspension of disbelief will not allow me to fudge the timeline, just like a few months. Like you're fine with demons, you're fine with the power of three and all of that, but you draw the line at that was one thing. Somebody made a comment about the cell phones in that Maria had drawn the cell phones, and I was like,
Yeah.
you're fine with everything, but you draw the line at the Nokia, at the version of Nokia that was drawn. Like, really? Like that's the hill you're gonna die on.
Um, that is really funny because we were having a debate on this podcast because I was thinking
Okay.
it was between 421 and 422. Nugent, I think you might have talked to Nugent before. He was on the podcast and he thought it was between season 5, episode 9, and season 5, episode 10. I'm like, oh, I don't know. So now I know
It
it's
is
early
it is
season 4 for
season
you.
4,
Okay.
but it's fudged in there because
Okay.
I believe right after Paige moves in is when Piper learns that she's pregnant.
Okay. Right.
So,
Well,
and I know the big thing was, oh, well, Paige just shouldn't have a charge yet, and this, that, and the next thing. I was like, well, she's not technically her white lighter, but she's just sort of testing out the boundaries of, okay, being a white lighter is part of who I am. I will ultimately have to be this mentor. Let me mentor this young woman in terms of a like artistic relationship. That's kind of why I keep it in the art realm as this way. It's like, okay, she's not technically a white lighter for this particular character. So
okay. And so Paige moved in at the end of episode 6 of season 4. So maybe there. Okay.
yeah, that's what I'm
um,
saying. I fudged the time a
yeah.
little bit.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
terrible. It's not like something that happened in like season 8. I couldn't say it's in season 4. I mean, there's no magic school isn't a thing yet. Yeah.
Okay. And then I think you might have touched on this. We were wondering too, was it always planned as a 5-issue run, or was there a plan to continue it, or was it just canceled prematurely, or was that
Um,
just
it the way it's always been said to me is that like everybody always does things in like 4 or 5 issue chunks. So it was, okay, we're going to do 5 issues. Okay, great. We did 5 issues. We did a self-contained story. I always allow room for I always allow room for there to be some sort of expansion on it, just in general. Wishful thinking. Um, it ended up not happening. That is what it is. But I would have loved to have done another couple of another couple of miniseries on it. But yeah, I mean, I honestly I don't know if they still have. I don't know if Dynamite still has the license right now.
yeah, I have no idea.
Um,
Yeah.
so I mean, if Dynamite called me up to do it, sure. But I don't even know if they have the license anymore.
Right.
So
Um, if you continue to write, did you have any ideas of what the next arc might be?
I wanted to, I mean, in a perfect world, I would have had 3 arcs to work with, and I would have one focus on each sister. So I started with Paige, then I would have one focus on Phoebe, and then I would have one
Hmm.
focus on Piper. So in a perfect world, I would have that ability. And at that time, um, Phoebe had Cole was around, but he was still sort of, I don't know, like I always called it like he was on sabbatical. He was finding himself as Balthazar, but not really. Do I want to be a demon? Do I want to be a good guy? That kind of thing. Um, and very like Eddie Brock. Um, and so, I would have done something with Phoebe and with Cole and how that relationship affects her and whether or not she wants to so because Piper was always like, he's a bad boy. You should be done with bad boys. You're too old for this, kind of thing. Um, and and Phoebe was also trying to like get her life together in terms of like get her career together, because that was like Phoebe had arrested development this whole time. She was like the immature kid and this, that, and the next thing, and she didn't have a career. When we first meet the sisters and that pilot episode, it's you've got Piper, she's working at a restaurant, but she at least is doing something. Phoebe's had just gotten back from New York and she's all over the place. And so now she's at the newspaper and she's finally starting to like find a career and find a flow and see where she's gonna, where her place is in this world. So I think it would be really cool to try and explore that as well. And then with Piper, if we had done a third arc, it would be, Piper dealing with, being basically the superhero and being a mom and balancing that, and also dealing with her own very complicated relationship with their mother before their mother passed and everything. So dealing with, okay, what kind of mom was she versus what kind of mom do I want to be, and things like that. So that was kind of where I wanted to look in that arc. But I mean, each arc was going to focus on one particular sister. So
Nice.
So we were talking, and I don't want this to come off as shady, but we couldn't figure it out. So I have to ask, why was it called A
okay.
Thousand Deaths?
Honestly, I did not choose that title.
Okay.
Oh, interesting.
I didn't choose that title. I am terrible at titles. I'm the first person to admit that. So I had put like a whole list of possible titles, and I was using like different art phrases like provenance and things like that. Because I also thought that it was like a cool, like a deep, deep cut, but a deep cut for Prue, because remember Prue was working at the art dealership and everything. So I thought that it was like a cool thing to do the art as like a
Tie
deep
in.
cut for Prue. So I was like looking at things like like provenance or patents of like not a patents of nobility, but something like that. And just thinking of different ways to bring in the fine arts, the high art of this. And because it was a high concept kind of idea, and then they were just like, we're going to call it A Thousand Deaths. I'm like, all right.
That's so funny.
Okay. I don't know. I apparently have not come up with anything better, so just call it what you want. Also, I mean, I will say this. So, is it Paramount?
Who has licensing right now?
Yeah, I think it's Viacom. Yeah. So whoever had the license, they have their own people looking at all the scripts. So I remember there was one thing that really irked me. Oh, so like it's in the first couple of pages when I know you probably know exactly what I'm talking about, where the demon throws an energy ball and Paige screams energy ball because that's how her powers works, and it just says energy in that.
Yes, there.
I argued to the point where I thought I was going to get fired from this. And this is like the first issue of 5. So this is a hill. I'm picking my hill to die on really early. And I argued, I was like, no, that's not how it is. And they're like, well, the producer from Viacom or whatever says that it is. And I'm like, well, they're wrong. I'm like, I don't think you realize how much I have watched this show. I don't think you realize I have the entire like 8 seasons on DVD. Like, I was like, I don't think you realize how much I know this. And they're like, no, well, that's what they want. I was like, I'm telling you. So every time they would have, so we would get a lettering pass back from the letterer, and I would put that as a note. No, change it to this. And the letterer would change it, and then it would go to them, and then they would change it, and then I would see it, and I'm like, and so I said to the letterer, I was like, why didn't you change it? He goes, I did change it, and they changed it back. What do you want me to do? I'm like,
oh no.
But that was a hill I was going to die. And that's what, page 3?
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty early. Um, but yeah, so A Thousand Deaths, I don't know who came up with that. It could have been Paramount, Viacom, whomever. Um, and that was definitely a sticking point when it came to how Paige's powers worked. And her saying the whole thing. I was like, why would she just say energy? That makes no sense. Oh God. You can't
I
fire me now. No, I'm just kidding.
I well, how about I do know that energy balls are a subset of all energy magic,
Hmm.
and there's energy bolts, there's energy shapes you can do. So maybe they're just
Hmm.
making it work. In my brain, just say it's all part of energy magic, even though they're not specific like they should be.
I appreciate you trying. I appreciate
Yes.
that attempt, but
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
still gonna be angry about it.
Okay.
I'm still holding this grudge.
um So I have a question too, because in issue 1, Piper had that like huge boost of power. She power walked, and exploded all the demons. um, and both Phoebe and Leo noticed it was kind of unusual and extreme for her. Can
But
you
that's a
explain?
hint. That's a hint to her being
Yeah,
pregnant and not knowing
pregnant.
she's pregnant yet.
Okay,
Yes. Because
okay,
remember when
cool.
she realized that she was pregnant, that's when all of her powers
Her
started
powers went
getting all
wonky.
screwy
Uh
and
huh.
everything. Yeah.
Fun. I love that. Oh,
So yeah, so
inside
that
information.
is the nod to
Okay.
her not knowing that she's pregnant just yet.
Nice. Nice. No fireworks coming out yet. Okay.
See, I know this show, and that's why it
Hmm.
got me so. I'll stop. I'll let it go.
um, um, one of Sean and I's favorite moments is Elise with her fist in the air going, "Damn it, Phoebe!" Was that intended to be as funny as it was, or it's just
It
it ended up that way?
it was like I wanted it to be. I think the way I wrote it was something like, part of her really is frustrated and angry, but another part of her is understanding and realizing the absurdity of the moment. So Maria was just basically looking at it and kind of like combining it into this like, I am pissed, but I'm still gonna make fun of myself because I'm trying not to take myself too seriously, kind of thing. But I thought it was great because this idea of like her, and also, I mean, she herself is a little erratic and emotional and everything because, again, she's pregnant and doesn't know it yet. So she's a little sort of off kilter in terms of like how she's reacting to things and especially how her powers are reacting to things. So,
Mm,
yeah.
nice. Let's see. In issue 3,
Okay.
Phoebe is stabbed by Robin, and but I but I also love like Leo's reaction, because we see like how Leo's inability to save Prue really weighed on him, and he never really got to voice that in the series. So even though it was like a brief moment, I really liked that we got to see how he felt, maybe like he failed as a white lighter. Was that something that was significant for you when writing that?
It was. I was told that I couldn't use Prue at all, but considering this was season 4, I wanted to make sure that it was still fresh in their minds and it wasn't just, okay, our sister died, whatever, we met our new sister and here's our replacement. I didn't want that at all. I wanted there to be an acknowledgement. And I said, I'm mentioning Prue. I am not showing her. We're not even doing a flashback. It's purely conversational. And they said, okay, fine. But I felt that Leo caring as much as he did for the girls, I felt that what happened with Prue and his inability to save her, that would have affected him.
Mm.
And I felt that the show didn't address it, or they didn't address it as importantly as I think it would have been. Um, and that's why I wanted that line. And I needed Leo to say that, and I needed one of the other sisters to acknowledge it. So when Phoebe says like, we all lost her, it's not just you.
Yeah.
But for Leo, there's this extra thing because not only is she basically family, but it's his job not only to oversee the girls and make sure that they're okay, but to protect them, to heal them, to be their backstop, to be their safety net. And the fact that he did all he could and it still wasn't enough. And I think that that's an attitude that he brought uh to the story, especially when he ascended. And
Yeah.
and obviously he wiped Piper's mind for her own good, or what he perceived was her own good. But once he ascended, that idea of like, I have this enormous responsibility and I cannot fail, I think is something that I wanted to just show in a smaller area, in like a smaller moment. And the fact that Phoebe acknowledges that and basically tells him, I hear you, I see you, I know what you're feeling, and I believe that you did what you could, and we still love you and we still believe in you, you know?
Yeah. And
So
I
I
picked up
wanted
on that
that
and I was
moment.
very grateful. I was very
Yeah.
grateful. So thank you.
The show meant a lot to me, and I hope it's apparent.
Yes.
I hope it's
Yeah.
apparent.
Good.
Well,
Good.
I think it was because one of the things that we really picked up on throughout your run is the sisters' voices. They really sounded like we were watching an episode. They
Hmm.
had the humor from an episode. So, what was your kind of process in bringing that to the comic?
Um, I rewatched season four. I rewatched seasons 1 through 4, and then I watched solely season 4, like twice, front to back. And like I said, I have the whole series on DVD, and and at the time it was streaming too, so I could like literally just pop in the DVD or just pop it on streaming and go to a particular episode. Um, and I wanted to, and this is something for any established character that I work on, I want to read how they, read books about those characters, read prior books, um, see what their cadence of speech is, because that's important to me. How you speak and how you present yourself is indicative of who you are. And especially if you're talking about these characters who people know so well, I don't want anybody to pick this book up and be like, Phoebe would never say that. Like, that's not how Paige talks. That's not how Piper speaks. And here's an example. I'm working on a character. I can't mention which one, but in uh in reading up on this character, it says that they're originally from Boston, Massachusetts. And I'm like, all right. And then I was reading a recent run of them, and they're written with an English accent. And I'm like, I'm confused. So I sent to the editor, like, this person is from Boston. What's which direction do you want me to go? And obviously, this week that we're recording this, it's Thanksgiving is this week, so I'm not going to hear anything back till next week. But that was something that I really need to know. Like, I need to know, am I writing a Cockney, or am I writing
Mm.
Boston socialite? There's a very big difference between the two. So I wanted to so I just basically just kept watching them, and there was a novel that had come out, so I read the novel as well, a prose novel on Charmed, and I read that, and I read all of Pat Chan's work Dynamite, excuse me, at Zenescope,
Zenescope.
and I just really wanted to just re-immerse myself in the language, in the voices, and so I mean, it's like a music, it's like melody, and you want to just immerse yourself in that to be able to say, okay, this person's going to sing this note, and that person's going to sing that note, and so on. So I'm glad it worked. I'm glad my
Yeah.
my deep dive research worked.
It did.
Yeah. So we got to see some of Jaw's backstory, but we're also quite curious about Maisie. Did you have any ideas about her backstory that never made it into the comics?
I didn't like think too much about it, but I just wanted to, I wanted to give enough, because what I tend to do, or what I tended to do early in my career, is I would go such a deep dive in every single person
Mm.
that I like, days would be peeling off the calendar, and then it'd be like, oh, now I actually have to take all of this information and synthesize it into a script. The problem is that I you know if you have too many characters, you either have to give them all room to breathe, or they're just throwaways. So I was like, all right, sorry. There's not enough
Gotta
time
let
for
this one
you,
go. Yeah.
kind of thing. Just because there wasn't enough time. I mean, I was only
Right.
given
5.
22
Yeah.
pages and five
Yeah.
issues.
Yeah.
Um, so if I was given a sixth issue, great, but that's not the way they were doing. I mean, at the time, Dynamite was basically 5 issue runs because you could print out 120 pages in a book and a particular price point and the
Mm.
marketing, blah blah blah, kind of thing. So
Yeah. I do have a question too about. I mean, I know it's supposed to be a little open ended. I think that's on purpose. But why was Gabe's soul different from the others? What kind of hold did Jal have on him, and is this connected to him being a demon at the end? Is there any kind of
um, I think that well, the reason of putting him as the demon was because, like I said, like I was kind of hoping that we would have a second
continue?
chance at
Right.
it. But I think it came down to I wanted him to be different because I wanted to accentuate the fact that Paige still felt like an other to a certain extent. So, of course, the guy that she's going after is going to be a little bit different, a little odd, a little off the beaten path. And then, you also get like the art school kind of trope of,
Sure.
people from art school are all weird and all over the place kind of thing. So,
Yeah. All right. Well, this
I
was
want to see if
fun. I'm trying to
I'm
think.
looking to see if I have any of the single issues behind me. I have the trade. Do I have any of the single issues here? I don't know. I don't think so. I have to organize that shelf. I have a, I have my shelf is just. I have to organize it. I know I do. It's one of those things. It's just it'll
You
go
know,
on the list of things to do, and it'll get moved from day to day and week to week, and it'll never get done.
sure. um, I know you said you couldn't use Prue. Was there any other characters that you weren't allowed to use?
Prue was the only one that was like boom. I don't remember if we could use Cole or not. Because it basically came down to a licensing of the person's likeness. So I don't know. I don't know if we had the licensing for Julian McMahon. Um, the reason why in the Zenoscope run Prue became Patience was because they wanted the character to be there, but they couldn't use the likeness of
Mm.
Shannon Doherty. So I don't know if it might have been that I was allowed. Again, I was allowed to mention them, but I wasn't allowed to show them. Because I don't know if we had Julian McMahon's permission. But because I mean, Cole wasn't such a huge part of the story; it was just literally a throwaway line. I think it's not something that I really dwelled on because he wasn't going to be this big part of the story. If we had done that second arc that I had talked about, then I would have had that conversation and said, what's the deal with this? Can we do this? This is the story that I'm going for. Usually, when I'm working on a project, I will outline like the whole story, like the whole 5 issues, and say, this is the main idea. These are the main, broad strokes of it. And then I'll take that and I'll say, this is what's going to happen issue 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. So they would have seen both editorial and the producers, the licensors would have seen what I was planning, and they would have either yay or nayed it early enough. So
Gotcha. I was curious mostly because there's the one issue where they say Daryl's name, but he's not seen. So I was like, oh, maybe they weren't allowed to use him. I don't know.
yeah, there were a lot of people that they weren't allowed to use. It was basically came down to like the three sisters and Leo. And that's when we create, and that's basically why I was like, all right, let's create some new characters, because this way they can't say we can't use these characters because we're not worried about showing somebody's likeness
Yeah. Nice. Well, now we know.
behind the
Did
scenes.
Yes.
Did you have any
Uh,
plans going in for like what would have happened to Gabe or Shayna since they don't show up in the show at all?
I would have loved to have brought Shayna back because I thought she was fun and just very perky and quirky. Um, and even if it was just like, she's having coffee with Paige, and then Paige, gets like the Avengers Assemble call, kind of thing. And Shayna's like, I got this, don't worry. Like, you get coffee next time. I got this, kind of thing. Um, just to sort of round out the cast a little bit, because we were limited in who we could use. Um, and Gabe, I mean, I would have loved to have opened that, the Piper, excuse me, the Phoebe arc. I would have loved to have opened it with them vanquishing Gabe, and then, bringing in, we see Paige sort of heartbroken, and then that allows Phoebe to sort of, recognize her own feelings about her relationship with
Mm,
Cole and all of that, and then that sort of kicks that off. So
gotcha. Cool.
Cool.
Well, I think that was really great. Is there anything else we should look forward to? I mean, I know you got some projects you can't talk about, but is anything that we should look forward to from you coming in the future?
So November 29th, Marvel Zombies #2 is in stores. I have a 10-page story with a bucket list character that I can't mention yet, that I hope people will like it. Nelson Daniel is the artist, and stunning work. And then Daredevil Gang War starts in December, and then in spring you will have coming out Rat City, which is the first issue of my new Spawn book, which I'm really excited about.
Woo! Great. So where can people follow you and find you then?
I am on Twitter, X, whatever it calls itself these days. Erica Schultz 42. I am on all socials at Erica Schultz 42. I am on Instagram at Erica Schultz Writes, WRITES, and my website is ericaschultzwrites.com, where you can pick up on my online store. You could pick up all kinds of books like Charmed, and Deadliest Bouquet, like we talked about before, and any Marvel stuff that I've done in the past. It's all up there somewhere, because it all sits in boxes in my basement.
Well, thank you. This was really great. It helped me appreciate, I think, the Dynamite comics even more. So just having those little tidbits,
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much
Uh,
for supporting it. I'm glad that I am glad that people really liked the comics, but also saw the amount of time and effort that Maria Laura and I put in to make it feel as authentic to the show as we could.
nice. Yay.
Yeah.
Cool. So that's it, everybody. Sean, tell people where they can find you.
You can find me, as always, on Instagram under Sean.Perrette. That will lead you to my threadless shirts, or my book, which is Brew, A Dream of Waking. Still trying to get that second book out, but Erica called me out without knowing it. I am obsessed with shows and other things, and I'm letting that get in the way of the book.
Sorry.
Yeah, I know. Like things. I know. I'm writing a Charmed musical right now for the podcast. We're doing a radio musical.
Amazing.
Very exciting. It's going to take place kind of in the Zenoscope Run area, like right between like early season 10, with flashbacks to the series, kind of like a Cat House episode. I'm very excited. It's happening.
Very cool.
Yeah, but you can follow this podcast at Words of the Witches, all places, except for X or Twitter, where it's Words of Witches. And yeah, we will see you next week when we start the manga. So lots going, or actually no, later this week. It's this week when this comes out. And yeah, we'll see you soon, Spellworders. Thanks for listening. All right, bye. Your
Bye.
destiny still awaits.